an issue that hasn't had the degree of attention that it should really have had, that it deserves. And that's the health of our children. That's deteriorating. Kaushik, there are some key trends in the Indian economy I would like to show you, as you have done lots of work in these areas. This data, which you're obviously familiar with, is from again another paper by Arvind Subramanian, the former chief economic advisor, then with Harvard, and now back in India with Ashoka University. He's shown that there are two contradictory trends. He's shown that there are some positive signs with improved access by ordinary poorer people, vulnerable people, especially by women, to government welfare measures. For example, more people are using bank accounts, more women are using bank accounts. There's been a huge increase in gas cylinders for cooking that women have really appreciated. On top of that, many more homes are getting more electricity, and the number of homes with toilet facilities has risen, though there's some way still to go on that. All good signs. Arvind Subramanian also points out some really disturbing trends in the data in what's happening in our country, especially related to child health in India. There's a sharp increase in anemia. There's little or no reversal in the downward trend of stunting among children. And diarrhea and acute respiratory syndrome are back on the rise again. These are awful signs. Kaushik, in all your work on malnutrition and stunting, can you explain why child illnesses and stunting is so bad still, and in fact illnesses are getting worse?
Hugely. That should receive much greater attention, Prannoy. And the malnutrition figures suggesting what some people are beginning to talk about, that it's a K-shaped improvement that is taking place, that the top segment is becoming better. It's like the top arc of the K, and the bottom is becoming worse. And the malnutrition data which has come out, and to me, actually, that is the biggest worry. And we should focus a lot of attention on that. And that is showing that since malnutrition is not something that the middle class, upper middle class, even the lower middle class suffers, it's the very poor, and India still has a large segment of that. That segment is becoming slightly shorter for their age over the 5-year period. In 13, I should give the data completely correctly, for 22 states and union territories, the data has been given out, not for all over India. Of these 22, 13 states, stunting has taken place, which has not happened before. So stunting is taking place. It is true UP, the biggest state, is not a part of this data. So unless UP is going in a totally different direction, it is an all India worry. There are a few states which have done better. Bihar surprisingly has done better. Hats off to that. I think Assam has done better. Andhra Pradesh not bad. Sikkim not bad. But the average is loss of height for age for the below 5-year age group, which is demographers or health economists call stunting. Stunting becoming higher, greater, meaning the population becoming more stunted, is a very rare happening. That has happened from 2015 to 2019.
So what are the underlying causes and really the reasons behind this child malnutrition and stunting in our country?
Once again, we should immediately begin to dissect this. There is also some data which is suggesting that, our sanitation has improved over this period. Cooking fuel, better fuels you are using, so pollution is less. So those things are not causing this. So almost certainly the income of the poorest segment has been going down. Even while the country is growing, growth is coming down, but it is still positive growth. The poorest segments are becoming poorer. Inequality has gone up. We've got data from Oxfam, we've got data from Piketty has analyzed this data. Inequality is going up. So what is probably happening is that the poorer segments are becoming poorer, and that is leading to malnutrition, which should not happen for a country like India. With so many strengths, vibrancies, there should not be malnutrition increasing.
And the trouble, Kaushik, is that the media tends to, not only in India but all over the world, tends to and has historically always tended to highlight major sensational events. Suddenly 10,000 people have died or 5,000 people have died in an earthquake or a flood. But millions die because of malnutrition, and millions of children, that too. And that's not highlighted. Why? Because it's a slow process. It's not a sudden. So if it's sudden, you report it, but if it's much bigger problem, like malnutrition, it doesn't hit the headlines. But in your opinion, is that the biggest concern? Malnutrition and child death looking ahead 10, 20 years from now?
Absolutely. So that to me, in fact, my future forecast, I will tell you, I feel there's going to be an immediate pickup. Of course, recovery, India's going to recover. Then it's going to be moderate, slowish growth. After that, I'm again worried because all these factors, what it will do in the long run. But the great rosy story of India, which began somewhere in 2003, 2004 and continued for 7-8 years where the whole world was talking about, that for now seems to be blighted. And coming back once again to this particular topic, this of malnutrition, is something that can do a lot of long-run damage. For that, once again, we have to be focused on inequality. I mean, inequality is important. You just don't want the country to grow because the top segment is growing very, very rapidly, because these kinds of factors will begin to cut into the country's long-run growth prospects. And I feel a lot of the attention from here onwards ought to be in these sectors. But for that, once again, I'm going back. The country to stand together, not be as divided. And as you're saying, Prannoy, also in analyzing data, what you're suggesting, you're not saying, but I'm saying, you also need a bit of an openness. You can't, as soon as a number is pointed out, you don't say that I'm not going to take it seriously because this is ideological. The numbers are not ideological. So we have to look into the numbers in the face, and they say that this is worrying. I can disagree about the cause of it. What you're saying is the cause is not the cause. There's always a dispute, but we must look at the numbers, and the numbers are very worrying at this point of time.
Michael Kremer, child malnutrition and stunting are some of the major problems facing India. You've studied this area in depth. What can and what should be done for our children in the distribution of vaccines? Which is the more likely future scenario?
You know, our analysis suggests that it's worth it for even the lowest income countries to purchase vaccines. And we did an analysis for Africa, and virtually for every country in Africa, it makes sense. You know, COVAX has pledged up to 20% vaccines for up to 20% of the population, but it makes sense to go beyond that. And so even for low-income countries, we would advise going out and, if necessary, borrowing to do this. The World Bank has made $12 billion available for financing vaccines, and actually, much of that money has not been used. So I think if I were a finance minister even in a very low-income country, let alone a middle-income country, I would think this would be one of the best expenditures that could be made. Now, that's not to say that high-income countries don't have obligations. I think high-income countries should be contributing to this as well through the COVAX facility. There may be, there'll be technical judgments about which vaccines are best given the new strains that are coming out. Okay? Now, the other aspect is who should purchase this. And there, I think there's an argument for national governments to do that in some cases. The government of India may want to do that. There's also a very important role for international organizations. The countries that have already ordered a lot of vaccine, Israel, UAE, US, UK, we're probably going to have a lot of our needs met through existing capacity. But there are many other countries in the world where it's going to take a long time with existing capacity to vaccinate them. And so you may need an international body like COVAX to order these vaccines. And then if they solicit bids, Indian firms are in a very good position to win those bids. India is really the vaccine manufacturer for the world, and so of course it will be important to produce to international standards and so on to do that. But I think both national governments and international organizations should be purchasing.
Okay, and finally, may I go back to you, Professor Milgrom, and ask a rather naive question. May I ask you for a moment about your own work, including the work for which you won the Nobel Prize, and how it helps you understand not only micro-human behavior, which its focus is, but is also very relevant for understanding the bigger picture. I mean, the connection between your work and how you can extend it for us to understand what's going to happen next in the economy.
Well, what my work has been used for, mainly, at least the work that was cited by the Nobel Committee, has been about designing better markets. We are starting to see lots more designed markets now when we do, markets for roads, as we get self-driving cars, the way that the car sharing takes place. We see online markets now that are designed for matching people more effectively. All of those things are, so this isn't so much about the macro economy as about the details of how people are organized. And I'm one of many people who have worked in that area, and this improved efficiency is going to help. It's going to help a lot of people by using resources better and making resources available more widely to more people, because less of it will be wasted. So that's the single biggest thing. But I'm going to dive away from your question a little bit. Sort of my biggest disappointment about the prize is the work that I'm proudest of. I can't answer your question with it all. A lot of it is really fundamental work about game theory, about the role of belief. When I started working, economics was about supply and demand and conditions of entry, all physical things. And game theory says, what people believe is also really important, and what they expect is also really important in driving their behavior. And the fundamental work that I did in that area is the work that I'm personally proudest of, that didn't get mentioned at all by the by the Nobel Committee. So and it's not at all useful to you. Maybe that's why, because for somebody like you who's saying, what can I predict about the macro economy with it right now? Well, nothing. I can't tell you anything about that, but it's very helpful in other personal situations. Would you like one more story? Can I tell you?
Yes, we would love that. Please go ahead.
Last story is about how I met my wife. And there's some game theory in this story. So I actually met her at the 1996 Nobel Prize dinner when William Vickery and Jim Mirrlees won a prize. And I was seated next to her at the dinner, and we had a really pleasant evening, and we danced and laughed and talked. And I flew home, and I wanted to know, I decided I wanted to see her again, but I wasn't sure how. I lived in California and she lived in Stockholm, and how do you approach somebody like that, and how do you convince somebody like that it's worth taking a chance to even date you, whatever, when we're so far apart. So what I decided to do, being the game theorist that I am, is I wrote her a letter and I said, look, I had a really good time and I'd like to see you again. And since you live in Stockholm and I live in California, I'll send you a plane ticket and meet you anywhere in the world. Wow. And that was supposed to get over. I was thinking she's going to talk to her friends. They're going to tell her there's no future, and I have to do something big enough that it will shut up the friends, right? And her confidence and generate. So that was a game theorist's move, and it worked pretty well. We're married now, and together for 20 years.
Let me tell you, of all economists that have given examples and lessons, I think for our viewers, that story you just said will resonate the most.